your name in the chat box. During the presentation, we do ask that you do mute your phone. We will be recording today's session, though we do welcome questions in the chat box. We'll be monitoring the chat box, and we'll have an opportunity to talk through any questions following the presentation. After that, we will be heading into our interactive session. So there'll definitely be opportunities to discuss, and we encourage that. With that, I'm going to pass it off to Katie, who will get us started today.
All right, great. Thank you, Diana. And good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be with you here virtually today to discuss the Saco River Watershed and talk about the discovery meeting and what all of this entails. This is the first meeting. We'll have another one tomorrow, and we're excited that you're all here with us today. This first slide shows the agenda for the meeting today. We'll start with welcome and introductions, and I'll prompt our different team members to introduce themselves shortly. After that, we'll get into a brief overview of risk map and the discovery process. We'll talk about the Saco River, a snapshot of that, and discuss prioritization of the next steps of the risk map process. We'll talk about engineering analyses that go into these types of products, regulatory products that are available, and then dive into an interactive discussion that we hope that you'll put your input for. As Diana said, we're recording this session. We ask if you've joined late, please put your name, your position, and the organization you're representing in the chat box, as that is our virtual sign-in sheet. And if you could please keep yourself muted for the presentation portion. Once we get into the interactive discussion, you're welcome to unmute and discuss. And if you have questions while you're working through this, please put them in the chat. So we'll start with introductions. I'll start with myself. My name is Katie Swanson, and I'm a project engineer with Compass. And we'll go through our risk map team. If you'd like to unmute yourself, and please introduce yourself. Thank you.
Hello, I'll go next. My name is Diana Rodriguez, and as I mentioned, I'm the project manager for the Saco River Discovery Project.
Hey, Diana, I don't think Brian's joined us yet, so I'll go ahead. My name is Rosemary Bullock. I'm also with Compass, and I am part of the project team.
Hi, I'm Parker Brookfield, a GIS specialist with Compass.
Do we have Kimmy on the line?
Hi, mic was off.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Kimmy Rapico. I am a GIS specialist with the Compass Group.
Hi, my name is Sonia Alvarez. I'm also the GIS specialist with the Compass team.
All right, great, thank you. And now I'll open the floor if we have any FEMA representatives who would like to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. This is Carl Anderson with FEMA. I'm a GIS specialist here in FEMA Region 1 that is in Boston. We cover all the New England states. I see a number of people here on the phone that, of course, I know very well. So welcome to everyone. We're looking forward to getting some great input from you all on this discovery process. Thank you.
And hello, I'm Colleen Bailey, and I am a project manager with FEMA Region 1, working with Carl, and we're excited that you're all here. Thank you.
Okay, I think, sorry, I don't have the view of everyone else on, but if I missed anyone, you can jump on later and introduce yourself. Next, we'll open it to city, county, and state partners. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry. Hi, I'm Bob McLean, civil engineer, FEMA Region 1.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, I'm Sue Baker. I'm the state coordinator for the state of Maine. And I would like to say a shout out hi to Carl and Colleen, who I haven't seen in a long time.
Hi, Sue.
Miss you.
Yeah, good to see you too, Sue.
Hi, this is Jennifer Gilbert. I'm the New Hampshire NFIP State Coordinator.
And hi, I'm Janet Parker. I'm with the Maine Floodplain Management Program with Sue.
Great, thank you. And if there are any associations that would like to hop on and introduce themselves, I'll give you a moment. Okay, I think, when we hop into the discussion portion, we can get to know each other a little bit better too. But thank you all for joining today. We have a great team, a lot of resources on this call. So I really appreciate everyone hopping on to talk about Saco River. So let's dive in. We're going to start with an overview of FEMA risk mapping, assessment and planning, or risk map, and the discovery process, and talk about what that means if you're not familiar with it. So risk map is the second phase of a modernization process for the FEMA flood map products. The first phase was the map modernization program, which was a 5-year effort to modernize maps. So part of this was taking all of those paper maps and just making them into a digital format. And this effort resulted in about 92% of the population being covered with digital flood data instead of having to go through old paper maps, which is an improvement in the ability to access the products. But there was a little limited upfront coordination, and scoping wasn't mandatory. So it was the next phase of it was aimed to address that. So the risk map is what we're currently working under, and the goal of this is to have it be a more collaborative approach, which this meeting is the first kickoff of that for Saco River. The goals are to produce quality data, increase public awareness, and help drive actions that reduce flood risk for the entire United States. A shift with this was made to be more watershed oriented, because everyone on this phone call knows that water doesn't really care about political boundaries or county boundaries. It flows in watersheds. And we also focus, as I said, on the upfront coordination, which is this call. And discovery is a mandatory part of that. So you are helping us to meet that mandatory statement by being a part of the discovery process, which we'll talk about as part of these slides. This is an overview of the value of risk map. The effort with this is to really collaborate with the state, local, and tribal entities to deliver quality data that both increases public awareness and leads to actions that help reduce risk to both life and property. So if everyone's aware of their risk, the intention is to really help to make actions that mitigate that risk. Discovery is this meeting that we're on. We'll have an interactive process. We'll receive your comments, and there'll be a report that comes out of this specifically for the Saco River Watershed. And as part of this, we really seek to collect data. We're doing data mining, and we look into that data and use that to provide a comprehensive look at the watershed and determine where we should put our resources to help meet the needs of your communities and really understand the flooding risks and deliver products that help you understand the flooding risks in the Saco River watershed. So this happens when an area has been prioritized, which we'll talk about what that means in later slides if you're not familiar. But a project scope hasn't been determined. So this whole process really helps us refine our targeted areas for the different types of modeling and mapping that come out of this, which of course we'll dive into those details as part of this presentation. The intention is to really help drive up that visibility of the available information that FEMA develops for flood risk, both in the products and the services that are provided to help mitigate flood risk. And the goal is to really bring communities in, increase education and awareness so that you're not given maps that you had no idea were happening and don't really meet your needs, we want you to be a part of the process so that you can help us improve the product that you're given, and you're, a part of the whole process. So we're not working in a silo. From this, there will be flood studies, and there's different levels of funding that have already been, or different flooding that has been appropriated for it, funding, and then there'll be flood risk assessments, and potentially mitigation planning and technical assistance projects from this. So this is the beginning of the understanding of the flood risk in Saco. This is a lot on a slide, but it has a ton of information on it. But this is the overall timeline of the risk map activities, because this is it's a complicated project, and it takes time in order to really deliver that final map. A lot of work goes into that. So I'll in that middle bar is an approximate timeline of how these projects go. It takes several years. So after this meeting, it will take a little bit of time before we get an updated map for the Saco River. But we want to include you in the process, so you're not surprised at the end of this. On the left of the bar is where we are today. This is the discovery meeting. From this goes into different types of work that helps drive the maps themselves. And I wanted to point out the Grafton County preliminary meeting. That's a separate project from what we're talking about today. And one has already occurred, or both have already occurred. Sorry, so they already have prelim maps. And we'll show you an overview map of what areas within the Saco River are covered by this discovery meeting. But you can kind of see the overall progression of where this project goes. We're in the very beginning of this process. On the bottom, there's a small community engagement bar chart, and that shows roughly, where the check-in points are, where you'll be pulled in and brought up to date on the progress. Input will be requested at that point, so you can kind of have a general understanding of where this process is going from this slide. Let's dive into the Saco River. Let's talk about the watershed. This is an overview map of the boundaries of the Saco River and the different counties that are included in it. As pretty much probably everyone on this call knows, the Saco River encompasses 2 states, Maine and New Hampshire. The discovery that we're talking about today only includes 4 counties. It's Carroll, Coos, Grafton, and Oxford. York and Cumberland are not covered as part of this scope of work. 37 communities are included in this. I'm hoping that a lot of representatives from these communities are on this call or will join us tomorrow. There are a little over 1,000 total stream miles covered by this, and approximately 44,000 residents who are within this community. This is a complicated map, but we have a copy of it that have been distributed prior to this call, and we can dive into it during the interactive breakout session that we'll have when I'm done talking. But I wanted to kind of show an overview. This includes the area that's covered by discovery. As I said, there are about 1,000 miles, total stream miles, that will be covered by this. And it includes the coordinated needs management strategy lines. So this is a database that FEMA uses to assess the validity and overall goodness of the existing flood map data that's out there. So a lot of them have been assessed, some haven't been verified, and we can kind of dive into what those mean later if you have questions. But this is an overall snapshot of that CNMS data. We've also included the average annualized loss, which is a type of data that goes into the prioritization, which we'll dive into in the later slides. But overall, this is a way to show on an annual basis the dollar value of repetitive loss from flooding. So the shaded areas show that, and it goes from a pale yellow, which is very low, to that purple area, which you don't really see much purple in this watershed, but that, or a little bit, but we can dive into that later. But those are areas where you have the cost of repetitive flooding is very low to very high in a general categorized way. So that's on this slide, and we can dive into it later in the interactive session. So one goal of Discovery is to coordinate with everyone on this call, all of the watershed stakeholders, representatives, and identify locations that are the highest priority for two types of engineering method or the product that comes out of this. So this would be redelineation and detailed study, and we'll talk about what those are if you're unfamiliar with them. But we use all of the data, a lot of different data sets. We bring that all together to come up with this prioritization scheme to look at what areas really need to be studied in depth. What areas do we have a good assessment of the flooding risk? And what areas do we not necessarily know about? So as I mentioned on the last slide, we have the FEMA CNMS database, but we also have letters of map change, average annualized loss, which was that yellow to purple bucket of data, risk class data. So we have population density, anticipated growth, the study age of the existing data, the presence or absence of dams and levees. That all kind of comes together to give us an idea of how well do we understand the risk, the flooding risk, or how complicated of a stream is this? Has there been a lot of development on it? The last source of data is your stakeholder input. You are the boots on the ground. These are your watersheds. Perhaps you live within the Saco River watershed itself. So you know really firsthand what this watershed is, and you can help guide us on what the flood risks are. So at the end of this, when we open, we'll prompt you on the different types of data we want. But the stakeholder input that we request as part of this meeting and as part of the open request, that goes into the prioritization, which is our recommended, the recommendation given to how this study will proceed with the rest of the risk map process. So we really, we want your input, and we'd like to hear what you have to say. On the bottom bullet, you can see we're requesting comments or data by June 30th. And I'll remind you of that later, and Diana will remind you of that. But this is a collaborative process. So prior to this meeting, we took all of that available data that we had minus your input, and we did a draft prioritization, where this is a way to kind of show everyone, all of the stakeholders that we've gathered, how how the next phases of the studies might look. This is not finalized, and that part will come within the later stages of the risk map process when the next engineering phases start. But this is a kind of first look at what the data is telling us. And the intention is that you can look at what the data is telling us and let us know, like, oh, this looks good, or no, I know that there's a dam here, a dam has been removed, or whatever it may be. You can kind of give us a heads up of, yeah, this looks good or not. This slide, it's pretty small, but we can zoom into it, and Parker will give a kind of tutorial on how to look at this map. But I think this is a great snapshot of how you can kind of see what's that first pass of the prioritization. Purple is an approximate study, yellow is a medium priority, and the blue is the high priority, and we'll talk about what that means and what that looks like for the next steps. But you can kind of see the overall snapshot right now for Saco, and what that means. So let's talk about the engineering analysis and how the next phases of the study will look. after prioritization. So there are three different methods of engineering that correlate to two different types of zones, Zone A's and Zone AEs. I'm sure everyone on this call is familiar with Zone A's and AEs, but they have different regulatory products that come out of it and different insurance requirements for the communities. I'll talk about the three different methods. Zone A is an approximate study, and we use base level engineering for that. We have a really cool snapshot of what that looks like for Saco. Then we have Zone AE, redelineation, and detailed studies, and those have different types of products come out of that. So the first one is a Zone A approximate study. This is really driven by hydrologic and hydraulic modeling based on new terrain data. There have been many advances in terrain data capture where we use planes to measure the changes in the earth, and we can get very high resolution data for a lot cheaper than other products were available, especially at the time of engineering that some of these studies were performed. So we can really capitalize on the goodness of the terrain data to drive the engineering for these approximate studies. We use stream gauge data or regression equations for the hydrology, and then we use HECRAS modeling for the hydraulics. This is a cheaper method because we're not doing field survey, which is expensive to go have people measure. We use the planes to do that. And it provides the approximate flooding delineation for the 1% annual exceedance probability or 100-year flood event. Because this is more of an approximate study, there are no base flood elevations provided, and all of these products are appeal eligible and can go under that process if necessary. This is probably my favorite slide in this presentation because it really highlights just the level of improvement that we get from the technology driven by the terrain and driven by the products that we can use for the engineering analysis now. But on the left, we have an area in the town of Hiram. I hope I pronounced that correctly. But this is the effective existing Zone A flooding delineation. And on the right, we have a snapshot of the BLE. And I'm going to use my pointer to really show this. But on the left, we have this purple area is the approximate flooding, the flooding around this pond area. And these yellow dots, these are letters of map change, where the property owners felt that their flooding risk wasn't really accurately represented by this Zone A shown. If we look over at the flooding, the approximate flooding area shown from the BLE results, you can see that the flooding zone, which is shaded in this blue kind of crosshatch, it is a much tighter snap to the perimeter of this pond area. So this kind of indicates that the letters of map change that are shown are potentially more accurate than what was shown in the old effective flooding zone. So just by changing the method and capitalizing on our terrain changes, we can better snap to different flooding areas because we have much higher resolution terrain data. Some of the complaints of the old mapping were that flooding would go uphill and it would kind of jump elevation changes. And that's because at the time that the maps were made, they just didn't have the resolution of data that we had. You had these kind of kidney beans just because we didn't have that technology at that time. So we're really able to get a lot of improvements from that. You can see down here, there's a stream too. We're snapping much closer to it, and that's really driven by the improvement in terrain. As part of this process, when we get into the mapping products, the entire Saco River watershed, excluding the two counties, I think it was York and Cumberland, those will all have this Zone A data if they're not prioritized for detailed or redelineation. So we're able to cover a lot more area because we have high resolution data, and we have products that are able to give us, we're able to just be a lot more efficient with our resources in giving this type of data. I hope everyone's really excited about the BLE product and about just this improved understanding of flood risk and ability to give more mapping to entire communities, because I think this is a really cool product. So the next study I'm going to talk about is called redelineation. And this results in a zone AE, but it's a little bit cheaper than a full detailed study because you're not redoing the engineering analysis. This is done when the existing detailed study base flood elevations are considered accurate. So as part of that CNMS process, the BFEs were evaluated and they seem to be providing an accurate representation of flood risk. So instead of redoing something, if it's giving us information that has been deemed appropriate, we utilize the new terrain and we're able to better snap to those areas if there have been changes, and give a slight improvement to the flooding delineation, that zone around it. That's why it's called redelineation. And we can do this without having to do survey and the new engineering analysis, which can be expensive. As part of this, all of the products that are delivered are the same that you'd expect with a zone AE. So that gives you that DFIRM, that map, and we'll look at an example of that later. You get the FIS data or flood insurance study data, the reports, which some people are probably familiar with, and we'll look at an example of in those base flood elevations. So all of that is done using the new terrain. The last method of study that I'm going to discuss is a detailed study. And this also results in a zone AE where you get the study, you get the BFE, the flooding delineation. But in this, we go and we have field surveyors get into the streams. They take measurements of the structures. They take cross sections of the streams themselves. So we can use that data for our engineering modeling to really understand the detailed hydraulics that's happening in the stream, so we can get a as accurate a representation of flooding as possible. So it's very expensive. So we don't always have to do that everywhere, depending on how complex an area is. But some areas are complex and really need this type of analysis. So part of this process is figuring out where those areas are. So we use that for the hydraulics. We use stream gauge data regression equations or rainfall runoff modeling for our hydrology. And from this, we get data tables and flood profiles, and really a good representation of what we expect during flooding events. On the bottom, you can see everything that comes out of that: BFEs, cross sections, floodway, and those two, that 100-year and 500-year floodplain. So the whole suite of products comes out of this. For these studies, we collect the best available data that you can find. A lot of different organizations provide free data, like the USGS. They have regional regression equations. They have different stream gauges that we're able to use the data for. And on this slide, you can see data that's already been collected for Maine and the sources. We're providing this in case you see this and you say, oh, I know of data that is, perhaps newer, or if you have knowledge of data that's planned, and you can see what we're using to drive the engineering analyses for this. This is the best available data that we've collected for New Hampshire. A lot of it is very similar, but the sources are slightly different because they're different states. And we'll be providing the slides if you want to look at this later. So no need to write anything down right now. Okay. From the engineering analysis comes different FEMA program or regulatory products. Getting a little ahead of myself. But we wanted to use this opportunity to talk about different programs that are available to help communities be able to address their flooding risk and mitigate those risks. This is a slide of several different programs that are available for communities. We really encourage, if you're here representing one of your communities, to look into these programs because they might help you be able to access funding for different programs. If you have a mitigation program that you really want to implement, but you don't have the funding for it. And there are a lot of technical resources if you need help. As you've heard earlier when we did the introductions, we have a lot of representatives from different organizations on the call. So I encourage you to reach out and if you have questions about these, we have a lot of people on who are experts in this. So please take advantage of this. I'd also like to show the hazard mitigation plan status. This is a friendly reminder of where your plan is, where your community is, and whether or not your plan, what the status is. It's a friendly reminder if you're getting close to an expiration date to look at this and start the process for updating. Here is a slide of general points of contact. There's a general FEMA mapping and letter of map change questions. You can call or send an email to this general line. Map Service Center, where you can look at preliminary and effective maps online for free. And there's general information about the National Flood Insurance Program. So I really encourage you to reach out and look for additional information if you have questions, because there's a lot out there. We've also included the contact information for Saco River specific correspondence from FEMA, from Compass, which is my organization, from the Regional Service Center, your state contacts. Everyone here is a resource if you have questions. So please feel free to reach out if you need to. And as I mentioned, there are several products that will come out of this process. So this is the flood insurance study. This is an example of what is existing as part of that map modernization process. So we've shown the one for Grafton County, and we have the study itself, the FIS, which has all of the information in it. And on the right, you can see the map and kind of that general format. On this next page just talks about the improvements and changes that are being made to these products. And the overall intention is to make it more user-friendly. So the study themselves, the tables have been reworked to really correspond to the databases that you get. So it's a database-driven FIS. So you don't look and say, oh, I want the flow rate at this location and have a struggle for where it is actually on the map. The improvements really help to make it more user-friendly. There was a lot of unnecessary boilerplate text that's been removed so that your eyes aren't kind of struggling to find the information that you need. The symbology has been changed on the maps themselves to really make it more easier to find what you're looking for. We're using aerial background or photos to help you be able to say, this is the location that I'm interested in seeing. So a lot of improvements. And when we get to that point, which, as I mentioned, it can take several years, this is what you can expect as part of the areas that we showed for Saco River Watershed. Okay. I promise I'm almost at the end of my part, and then we can all get into that interactive session. But this is a reminder of the data that we've already collected for the discovery data sets. So we've done that first pass of the prioritization, and this is kind of that kickoff for the feedback portion. So we're really looking at all of our representatives on this call, and we're requesting your input so that the prioritization that comes out of this, that coordinates to the engineering methods, we really want it to meet your needs and use the best available data and really incorporate your comments to best meet the needs of the communities. So we've listed all of the data that have been used. We're requesting your input, kicking off this process today. And as it's stated, we can have the interactive discussion where we'll really dive into those PDFs in this virtual format. Or if you are thinking about something you need time to discuss with other people, or you really want to look at the maps yourselves and dive in, you can provide comments by that June 30th deadline. So what kind of information are we looking for? We're interested in areas of claims or repetitive loss. We know this intersection is constantly flooding. Areas where have been a lot of land use changes. If an area went from really rural to very developed, that impacts the way that flooding happens. Levees, of course, dams, those are changing the way that water flows. Stream flow pinch points, different areas that kind of impact flooding, the way that we model it, the way that we understand it, and the way that water is moving kind of throughout our communities. We could also, different types of information that you could give us are disaster high watermarks, if you have that data. If you know that you're building or removing a dam or levee or other type of structure that would impact flooding. New construction of culverts or bridges, land use changes, planimetric data, information obtained from research by other organizations, universities, if studies have been performed, dam emergency action plans that can be very useful information for understanding how dams are operated, and really anything you can think of. If it impacts the way that water is moving, or impacts the understanding of flooding risk, please don't be shy with giving us your input, because you are the boots on the ground, you're the experts in your watersheds, and we really, there's a wealth of data online that we can get and from different sources. But this is kind of that missing key in our holistic understanding of your watershed. I'm getting some, or someone.
Hey, Katie,
Mhm.
this is Rosemary. We do have someone with their hand raised.
Oh,
Sue,
yeah.
did you have a question or comment?
I do. Just a quick question. This is the first mapping project that we've had that's multi-state in one watershed. So my question is just, will it be that the flood insurance study, that there's only one published and it will include both the data from Maine and New Hampshire? Or will they be separate flood insurance study products? That's it.
Yeah, Diana, do you know if it'll be split into two?
So Discovery, Sue, will include a one watershed report that include both states with the exception of Cumberland and New York. When you get to the regulatory products, those will still be released at a countywide basis. So you'll have the countywide or PMRs, whatever subset of panels are funded or prioritized based on those flooding sources.
Just checking because we haven't had a project like this, so I didn't know if one study gets produced, together for both states or if they were separate. So
yeah, generally they would run Discovery at a watershed, maybe the H&H engineering also at a watershed level, and then once you get into floodplain mapping, draft DFIRM, regulatory products development, that's when you would switch to a countywide format or countywide scale.
Great, thank you.
All right, great question. Thank you, Rosemary, for pointing that out. Thank you, Sue and Diana, for responding. Cool. Okay. I'm almost done too. So people, if you have other questions, we can open the floor and get into that interactive portion. Okay, next steps. Like I said, we're here today to gather information and kick off this process. You should have already received an email with the comment questionnaires in the maps. And we request that you submit those back to Chris. His contact information is listed on the slide by June 30th. After this meeting, we'll provide the slides that we've presented. We did take a recording, which will stop shortly before we get into that interactive session. That can be provided upon request if you'd like to hear my voice again. Or not, you don't have to have it. And then as in several later in fall 2022, we'll provide the final discovery maps, which have that prioritization finalized on it, and a report documenting everything that went into that. That will be issued to the communities by the fall. So something to look forward to. Now we'll jump into that interactive discussion. Previously, we used to all gather in a room and mark up maps with markers, but we've switched to this virtual format. So we're going to do that all together, and Parker will bring up the maps and we can comment them as a group. Of course, you are welcome to do that on your own and submit the questionnaires, which we request that you fill out the questionnaires too. But if you want to provide comments, if you need to think about them or talk about them, you can do that on your own. But we'll do that as a group in this like interactive session, which will be fun, and we hope that you won't be shy. So before we hop into that, I'll open the floor to questions specifically about the slides, anything that we've talked about. If you'd like more clarifications, you're feel free to ask your questions now.
Katie, we do have someone with their hand up.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Jennifer?
It's okay.
Go.
Hi, it's Jennifer Gilbert, New Hampshire coordinator. I know I think we only have one town on, and thank you, Tavis from Wolfboro, for attending. You had said about the recording being available. Our agency has a YouTube page, and I was just wondering if we could possibly put that up on there. And we were going to follow up with our communities to try to get them. Hopefully, we get more on tomorrow, but we're hoping to get some information up to people. And if we can get the recording up, that may be one way we could help get the information out.
Yeah, Diana, do you know how to answer that?
Yeah, I don't know offhand, Jennifer. I think we're gonna, if anyone from FEMA would like to jump on this one, or Brian. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, Diana, I think we'd have to reach out to the regional staff and ask them what preferences and whether or not we can share it. But Jennifer, I think it's something we can look into. Definitely make a decision and see if we can find out to give it to you.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
And also based on requests. So if anyone does request Jennifer, I could certainly distribute to communities directly upon request, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. I can't see if there are any other hands raised, but if we want to hop into the interactive discussion, if there are questions then too, we can always go back. Any others?
No, I'm just going to add one thing. I'm going to ask and find out about the YouTube thing. So I'll get back to you hopefully in the next hour or so.
Great, thank you. Okay, well then I think for the interactive session, we're going to start. Parker's going to give us a little bit of a tutorial on how to open and work with the PDFs. So I'll hop that over to her soon, and I'll be on the call. And as we have a lot of people on this call, so if there are questions that come up during the interactive session, we can go back to those. But yeah.
We'll also stop recording right now, just so the group is aware.
Thank you. And I believe